Psalm 36, either in verse 1 or maybe if you have a little header at the top of the psalm, it says, "To the chief musician, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord." We don't have any other information other than that. Beginning in verse 1, it says, "The transgression of the wicked saith within my heart, that there is no fear of God before his eyes. For he flattereth himself in his own eyes, until his iniquity be found to be hateful. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good. He deviseth mischief upon his bed. He setteth himself in a way that is not good. He abhorreth not evil. Thy mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens, and thy faithfulness reacheth unto the clouds. Thy righteousness is like the great mountains. Thy judgments are a great deep, O Lord. Thou preservest man and beast. How excellent is thy loving kindness, O God! Therefore the children of men put their trust under the shadow of thy wings. They shall be abundantly satisfied with the fatness of thy house, and thou shalt make them drink of the river of thy pleasures. For with thee is the fountain of life. In thy light shall we see light. O continue thy loving kindness unto them that know thee, and thy righteousness to the upright in heart. Let not the foot of pride come against me, and let not the hand of the wicked remove me. There are the workers of iniquity fallen. They are cast down, and shall not be able to rise." So this is a fairly small, fairly short psalm, and we see that it primarily deals with, in the first 4 verses, we see the wicked here, and then we see David praising God for his mercy, and we see him asking supplications to continue his loving kindness and to allow those that are upright to continue, while those that are wicked not to have victory. So we go back to verse 1. It says, "The transgression of the wicked saith within my heart, that there is no fear of God before his eyes." So who are we talking about when we are talking about the wicked? Well, we're talking about a couple different types of people, or a couple different subjects. So we have one subject, which is just your average, everyday wicked. And then we have another subject, which would be potentially the Antichrist. And so we'll look at that. We're going to go to a couple places. The first thing I'm going to read, and you can turn with me, but I'm just going to go to it very, very quickly. Job 15:20 says, "The wicked man travaileth with pain all his days, and the number of years is hidden to the oppressor." And throughout the entire book of Job, you see reference to the wicked, the wicked, the wicked, the wicked. And I believe that when we read about that, and when we read about the wicked here in Psalm 36, we're actually seeing the wicked that is referenced in 2 Thessalonians 2:8. 2 Thessalonians 2:8 says, "And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders." So we've said again and again and again that Psalms 16 through 41 deal with Christ in the midst of his kingdom. And we know that these from 21 through 39 specifically have to do with the Messiah or with the Messiah's work. And so we see here that this could apply either to your standard, average, everyday, unsaved person who is living wickedly in the will of Satan, or this could apply to the Antichrist himself, who is living wickedly in the will of Satan. There's they have common ground there. So he says, "The transgression of the wicked saith within my heart, that there is no fear of God before his eyes." No fear of God before his eyes. That's almost, or maybe even more so, ignorant when we read about Psalm 14:1. Psalm 14:1, it should be a very familiar passage. "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." So here the wicked isn't saying there is no God. They're just saying they don't fear God. I don't know what's worse. to know God exists and to not fear him, or to just outright say, well, there is no God, and to be a fool. I honestly don't know what's worse, and it doesn't matter arguing about it, because either way, you're not in a good situation. Either you're a fool or you're wicked. And in both cases there, not just if you're an average everyday fool. I mean, I do foolish things from time to time, so don't. But both of those groups there, both of those individuals, they're hell-bound. They're hell-bound. One group says there is no God. The other group says, I don't have any fear of God. And both are hell-bound. They don't have salvation. They don't have Jesus. It says in verse 2, for he flattereth himself in his own eyes until his iniquity be found to be hateful. And again, you can apply that either to your average, everyday, unsaved person, or you can apply it to the Antichrist. Everything is all about me, 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 me. Aren't I so wonderful? Aren't I so special? And I think that, and I didn't even think about this until just a few minutes ago, and I don't want to go on a tirade against it. But I think that in schools today, and not just in schools, but on television programs, children's channels, all different kinds of things, there's been this really huge dynamic push over the past, 10, 20, 30 years to try to instill self-esteem into your child. Well, you don't ever want your kid to have low self-esteem. You want them to have high self-esteem. They have to treasure themselves. They have to think highly of themselves. Now maybe I could be wrong, but that almost seems like it's teetering on the edge of pride. And we know what God hates. God hates pride. He hates a prideful heart. So I don't know if teaching self-esteem is the best thing to be teaching children at a young age, that you ought to value yourself highly. Now, I'm not saying we ought to think of ourselves as garbage. I'm not saying that we ought to think that we're worthless. I'm not saying that we ought to think that we are of no use. I'm not saying we ought to have thoughts of suicidality. I'm not saying that that's the direction we ought to go. I'm just saying that from a secular standpoint, teaching secular self-esteem is not, I don't think that's valuable spiritually for children. I think that too often goes into, you should have high self-esteem no matter what. That you should value yourself and you should speak your truth. We've seen that language today over the past few years, not necessarily in elementary schools, but in universities and colleges, about individuals who struggle with microaggressions need to speak your truth, and live out your truth. I don't know what your truth is. I don't know what my truth is. I don't know what the truth is. But this idea that truth is subjective, and that, and again, everybody has their own lived experiences. Everybody has their own things that they're dealing with. But to simplify that and to try to overtake the concept of truth, it's wicked. It's nefarious. But all of that to the point that, we see people that's kind of how people justify in their own hearts. Well, I can be a glutton, and that's okay. I need to be body positive. That I can be 300 pounds overweight, and all I have to do is be body positive, and it's not right to fat shame people. And I'm not going to be fat shamed even though I'm 300 pounds overweight and nearly dying of diabetes or cancer. That's the kind of place that people are in. And you don't believe me? Spend 2 minutes on Google and search up fat shame, and you'll find all kinds of this movement, this body positivity movement. That's almost a comical, and it shouldn't be comical because people are dying. obese people are at higher risk of death than people who are fit and take care of themselves. And I think it's unbiblical because when we're saved, our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. And I'm going to admit I eat too much from time to time. And over the past couple years, you all probably noticed I've swollen up a little bit. I'm trying to lose some of that again. But I'm not going to say I'm perfect and I'm the person that is qualified to speak on this matter more than any other. But we have a responsibility as Christians to take care of our own bodies. But, that's one of the lesser examples. There's another example, people now today apply that to your sexual orientation. Well, I'm going to be me, and this is who I am, and so I'm going to flaunt myself during the month of June. During Pride Month, I'm going to be proud of who I am and what I am and who I want to sleep with in bed, and however many people that may be, and however many at a time that may be. That's the kind of attitude you get into with, and I'm not saying that all starts in elementary school with teaching kids about high self-esteem. It's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that there's a slope, and if you're not careful, you'll slip down it. So this idea that he flattereth himself in his own eyes until his iniquity be found to be hateful. We ought not to teach kids, we ought not to teach ourselves to flatter ourselves in our own eyes. We ought to have a realistic view of ourselves. If I was 800 pounds, I shouldn't be flattering myself. If you have an individual who is homosexual, they should not think that that's a positive thing. If you have an individual who is extremely into taking drugs, or whether they be legal or illegal, in order to alter their state of conscience, and they think, oh, this is just great, it's wonderful, it's fantastic. Aren't I so wonderful? Look at all the things I'm figuring out because I'm microdosing this and I'm taking just enough of this. It's self-flattery and pride is what that leads to, is not good. So we know, though, the Antichrist is going to be extremely flattered with himself, that his entire world system is going to be built around worshiping him. That it will be entirely built around praise be to him, the false god, because he will act as if he is God. And how can you flatter yourself any more than that, than to literally put yourself in the position of God? Verse 3, the words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good. And again, you have people that's in order to flatter yourself to that extent, you've got to tell yourself lies, and you've got to tell other people lies. The lie that it is okay to be homosexual, that it is a positive thing to engage in those activities. It's just a lie. The idea that it's okay to eat until you give yourself diabetes, and people should find you beautiful no matter how big you are, and no matter what's wrong with you, no matter how many illnesses you give to yourself. You're beautiful, and no matter what, you're beautiful. That's not true. You're deceitful when you say things like that. You're lying not only to other people, you're lying to yourself. It's not okay. And I use that as an example, just because it's an easy example. But it's become very, very big in our culture right now. And I think that people, another one is mental health. It's become it's become almost a fad to have a mental health problem. Oh, well, I've been diagnosed with this, or I have this, or my doctor says I have this, and it's almost like you're joining a club, whenever you have X, Y, and Z problem. Look at me, how much of a victim I am because I have this thing that's wrong with me. And I'm not saying that people don't have things wrong with them. There are people that have autism. There are people that have Asperger's syndrome. There are people that have obsessive compulsive disorder. There are people that have all of these things. And that's true. But it shouldn't be your identity. And that's what people have turned it into. They've taken these small characteristics about themselves that actually represent a really small portion of what their life is. And they make that their major identifier. They put it on a name tag and they say, hey, this is me. I am autism. And that's me. And when you speak to me, you're talking to autism. And that's not who you are. God didn't name you autism. God may have allowed you to be born with it. That's not who you are. The same thing with any other mental health disorder or any other actual, I don't want to say actual, any other physical disorder that you may have. And people, they have a tendency to get lost and to get caught up in those things. And that's exactly what the wicked is doing here. He's flattering himself. He's lying to himself. You want to put an example of maybe something the Antichrist does. It's, oh, look at me, how wonderful am I? I'm performing all these miracles. I'm doing all these wonderful things. And it's Satan's power that allows certain things to occur. And then, taking Satan's power and hiding it and saying, no, it's actually God's power. Because I am God, because I am perfect, and that lying deceitfulness. So, you see this all over the place, both with your average, everyday, unsaved person and with the Antichrist himself. He deviseth mischief upon his bed. He setteth himself in a way that is not good. He abhorreth not evil. Now, we'll talk about this, and then I want to put a thought in your heads. He deviseth mischief upon his bed. He setteth himself in a way that is not good. For somebody that literally the night before, whenever they lay their head down in bed, they're planning out the evil things they're going to do the next day. They're making all their nefarious plans, that they're that dedicated to it. That they're laying down at night and they're thinking, who can I get one over on tomorrow? How can I further expand my power over some other individual tomorrow? How can I control somebody and make them feel pain tomorrow? That's the kind of dedication, that's the kind of the evil and sick twistedness that is in this person's mind. Let me ask you a question. How many times do you lay your head down on your bed at night and think, who am I going to witness to tomorrow? Who am I going to spread the gospel to tomorrow? What am I going to read and study in my Bible tomorrow? What do I think about that? Who tomorrow might need my help? I know so-and-so's been having trouble. They haven't asked for help. Who may need my help? Should I go talk to him or not? Who should I go see? Who should I go visit? This person's been really down. This person's been sick. They haven't been out. Who can I minister to? How often do we do that? Whereas you've got this wicked person, it's their life. They're serving Satan with a passion. Are we going to serve God with that same passion? Are we going to match that intensity? Or exceed that intensity in our walk with God? That's just a thought to put into your heads. Thy mercy, O Lord, this is verse 5. And so we're switching gears now. We're not talking about the wicked here. He says, Thy mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens, and thy faithfulness reacheth unto the clouds. Thy righteousness is like the great mountains. Thy judgments are a great deep, O Lord. Thou preservest man and beast. And God's righteousness, His mercy, His faithfulness, it extends beyond anything that is within our imagination. It's so far above what we can contemplate and what we can comprehend. He says, O Lord, thou preservest man and beast. Now that doesn't mean that we're eternally preserved. It's the same kind of way that man and beast were preserved in the flood. It's a temporal preserving. It's temporary. We're preserved until we die. But overall, man and beast are preserved, and they will be until this world is completely burned up with fire and restarted. The curse is removed from it. But God has the power to preserve man and beast. And again, we see when we study the book of Revelation all of the different horrors and tragedies that befall as God, he has his hand, he has this control over the earth. He's keeping everything in balance, everything in order. He releases that control and allows the universe basically to just rip itself apart without him exercising that control. He's preserving us. David says in verse 7, "How excellent is thy loving kindness, O God! Therefore the children of men put their trust under the shadow of thy wings." Look at very briefly at the book of Matthew. Matthew 23:37. Matthew 23:37, he says, O Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Now here we see that this is where Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit, if you want to, God has always wanted to bring his chosen people under his wings. He's always wanted to shelter them and protect them. He says, and ye would not. And so they refused that. But that's what God has to offer. We trust him and we go with him, and he'll shelter us under his wing, just as a mother bird would shelter her chicks under her wing in safety. He says, therefore the children of men put their trust under the shadow of thy wings. And there's no safer place than to be with God. There's no safer place than to be under his protection. No safer place. He says in verse 8, they shall be abundantly satisfied with the fatness of thy house, and thou shalt make them drink the river of thy pleasures. What God has to offer is so far and above and beyond the things that we could try to provide for ourselves. We get caught up in life, and we think, oh, well, I see that this company just came out with this new product, and I got to have it. This is just going to make my life so easy. It's going to be so wonderful. I can't wait to get this. Or this new toy just came out. I'm gonna go buy it, and this is going to be real fun. And it ends up sitting in your garage for 11 months out of the year and 29 days. And you pay thousands of dollars for it, and it just doesn't go anywhere. So, that's just an example, but people get caught up in these things. We get caught up with the hustle and the bustle. Even in rural America, Greenup, Kentucky, Lode, Kentucky, Lloyd, Kentucky, wherever you're at, the hustle and bustle, it comes for us all, regardless of where we're at. And so we get caught up in that. But we fail to recognize that whatever we can obtain for ourselves, whatever we can lay our claws on and just pull back into ourselves, and just whatever it may be, it doesn't compare to what God has to offer us. It does not compare. Now, there is a difference. In the Old Testament, when David wrote this, material blessings were a part of what was promised to Israel as part of their covenant. Material abundance, material goods, their crops growing, having food. That was part of the covenant, that God would keep that nation. Now, as Christians, we aren't promised all those material things. We're promised spiritual blessings. But the concept, the idea is the same, because you've got to be fed physically and you've also got to be fed spiritually. And let me tell you, if you don't get fed spiritually through one means or another, that starvation is worse than any starvation you'll ever feel from your stomach. Starvation of the heart is way worse. Starvation of the soul is way worse. Misery is a state of mind. You can be in pain and not miserable. It's kind of difficult whenever you got a lot of pain. It's really difficult, but it's possible. You can be uncomfortable and not be miserable. You can be sick and not be miserable. But if you're miserable, you're miserable. You can't be miserable and not miserable. And if you're spiritually starving, you're miserable. That's the hunger pangs of the soul. Misery. And so we ought to be seeking those spiritual things. We ought to, as Paul says in Colossians, set our affections on things above. And we ought not to set them on things of this world. We ought to look for what God has to offer to us, not what we can scratch and claw and scrape for ourselves. And so I'll reiterate and I'll say it doesn't mean it's wrong to get something for yourself. It doesn't mean it's wrong to enjoy something that this world has to offer, so long as it doesn't block out or go against God's will. If it were the case that we couldn't enjoy literally anything in this world, then I guess we'd have to get rid of the building and get rid of the pews, and we'd have to get rid of the light fixtures, and we'd have to stand outside and hold our breath because we couldn't enjoy the air either. And we'd have to end up like some cult or something and just drink the Kool-Aid, and that would be it. And we wouldn't be allowed to enjoy the Kool-Aid either when we drunk it. We'd have to make it taste bad or something. It's not wrong to enjoy things in life. It's wrong to let those things supersede God in your life. And so God has things, and even here he's talking about physical things for the people of Israel. These are physical, material things, and it's said that they're good, that he is rewarding them with those things. And that is good because God is offering it. He says in verse 9, "For with thee is the fountain of life, in thy light shall we see light." Can you see light without light? What do you see without light? Darkness. Without light, you can't see. There has to be a light for you to be able to see it. And so we're going to look very, very, very quickly over in the Gospel of John. I'm going to read John 1:9. He says, "That was the true light which lighteth every man that cometh into the world." And then we're also going to look at John 8. We're going to look at John 8 in verse 12. He says, "Then spake Jesus again unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." God offers us light. He offers that light that David is talking about here, and that light is Jesus. Verse 10 says, "O continue thy loving kindness unto them that know thee, and thy righteousness to the upright in heart. Let not the foot of pride come against me, and let not the hand of the wicked remove me." And so he's asking for God's loving kindness to continue. He's asking for his continual protection, his continual support, that he wants to maintain his walk with God. He doesn't want to be drugged down by the wicked. He doesn't want to be impeded by the wicked. He doesn't want to have to deal with the wicked. Unfortunately, we're going to have to deal with the wicked at some point in our lives, whether that's through, we're going to have to deal with them when we witness, and some of them aren't going to want to hear what we have to say. They're not going to want to hear the gospel. Some of them, it may not even be when we're witnessing to them. It may be when you go to the grocery store. It may be when you're driving on the road and somebody cuts you off because you know they're wicked and unsaved, and there's no way that anybody that ever cuts anybody off ever goes to church or does anything right. I'm kidding. But, you know, Christians cut people off too. And regardless of whether they're Christian, regardless of whether they're unsaved, we ought not to have a poor attitude toward people who don't know how to drive. We just ought to recognize they don't know how to drive and move on with our day. I know Ron has been a recovering road rager, and I think I might be hitting the step before recovering road rager sometimes. You know, I'm just one step behind that, Ron. No, I'm jesting. It's not that bad, but you have thoughts every now and again on the road. Every now and again, you have thoughts. The key is to not think them for very long and to put them out and think something better. But anyway, let not the foot of pride come against me, and let not the hand of the wicked remove me. There are the workers of iniquity fallen. They are cast down and shall not be able to rise. And David here is rejoicing and glorying in God's victory. And so you see the presentation of the wicked, you see the supplications and the praising of God, and then you see God's victory over those of iniquity, the workers of iniquity. And so it's a short psalm, but it's pretty much built in that three-piece format here. Again, you start with the wicked, you follow that with praising God, and then you end it with God's victory. And that is Psalm 36. Are there any comments or questions this morning?